Hello. In the Crown of Aragon 639 years ago, it was June 2nd, 1387. My name is Jonathan Seyfried. I'm a PhD candidate in history at the University of New Mexico, and this is the Historian's Notebook, a podcast about how history gets made. Season 1 is titled Multcara Companiona. We're looking at a document from each day of the first year of the reign of King Joan I of Aragon and Queen Violante de Bar. Let's begin today's document. Today's document is from one of Joan's commune registers. We're entering into a period of time, it seems like about a couple weeks long, when Violante's secret seal registers go silent. I mean, not entirely. There's still some interesting things, but it's no longer a daily occurrence that Violante is writing letters using the secret seal in the same registers where we found some of the more dramatic ones in the last month of the podcast. So it's intriguing to think about why. What is happening in the daily life of Violante that is preventing her from the frequency of that correspondence? Has Joan really bounced back? Is he doing okay? So there's no longer an urgent need to be writing every day to all of the people that she was updating about his health? Not sure. I'm not sure when the next serious health condition hits Joan. It could be that for the rest of the year, he is not in danger anymore. No scholars have found any letters from later on in 1387 that indicate anything like the severity that we saw in late April into early May. And also, there's no mention of any instances when Joan is unable to move, like unable to travel or go out hunting, like what we saw in January. So the current historiography has Joan pretty much healthy and capable from at least July until the end of the year, and then ongoing. So it's an open question in my mind as to whether he really is at full capacity by the time we get to July, and we're going to be watching for any hints that it might not be going as swimmingly as the Chancery would have us believe. But at least at this moment, we're not going to be hearing all that much personal stuff from Violante. I mean, there will be some in the month of June, I think, but just not nearly as much as what we've had for the last, say, 60 days or so. All right, let's get into today's document. It's a commune document, and what I've discovered is that when we're looking at one of the commune registers, these are the ones that, in my mind, are the most likely to have been issued without the participation of the sovereign in any way. So when I say that, I don't necessarily mean that the Chancery and the court officials were off leash and going like rogue and just doing whatever they wanted to do in the king's name or the queen's name. It's not quite that far. My guess is that for a lot of the documents we see in the commune registers, the court officials, they know that it's a matter that's not going to cause much controversy, and so they handle it themselves, and maybe it shows up in a list of items that gets reviewed with the king or queen at the end of the day, or maybe even at the end of a multi-day period. Could even be that in 1 hour at some point in the week, the chancellor can just list off a bunch of issues that have been addressed, one after the other. And if they're just, going through this list for like an hour, you can kind of run through something like, 50 to 100 cases. Now, I'm not sure anyone would really want to sit and listen to that, but basically, I'm just trying to illustrate how there could be so much documentation in the name of the king and in the name of the queen, and yet it doesn't necessarily mean that the intent of the actual person, Joan or Violante, is being expressed, that it's the intent of the office that is being expressed. Kind of hearkening back to the idea of the king's two bodies, that very foundational work by Ernst Kantorowicz. So today's document is one that doesn't really make any decisions. It's basically just asking for more information to be sent. There's a couple interesting quirks, though, about this document that make it, fun to talk about, I'd say. So let's talk about the apparatus first. There is no addressee line, so we have to look for the addressee in the first line of the main text block. And from there, we get the destination of Morella. So in the first line, it's actually more towards the end, like 75% of the way through, we've got VA, and then we have MORLLE with a macron. Now, I think at the beginning of the podcast time, I would have thought, oh, maybe that's the letter I after the O, but now I'm pretty used to interpreting that as the letter R. And so I just did a pretty simple Google search for I just put in MORLLE and then Spain. And the place that came up was the town of Morella. Now, Morella is incredibly picturesque. Oh my gosh. Looking at the Google Maps and photos of this particular town made me want to just go backpacking through the countryside of the Costa del Sol in Spain for a really long time. Because you get to see these locations that are just so incredibly like time capsules. We've seen this in a couple different episodes where we've looked at correspondence to some of the lesser known areas of the Crown of Aragon and seen that there's just been this remarkable preservation of what the town looked like in the Middle Ages. I mean, not exactly, but I mean, there's a lot that's still there in Morella. And what's really picturesque about it is that it's on this mountain, and the town, its streets are all basically around on the foothill part of the mountain. And so it's all these winding streets and stairways. And then at the top of the mountain is a castle. So it's kind of like, I don't know, your romanticized, stereotypical medieval locale. And, I go for that kind of stuff. So anyway, Morella, a really picturesque location today. And back in the Middle Ages, I think it was all set up for very functional reasons. There's some interesting history going back to the time of Muslim rule and then the Christians fighting for territory against the Muslims during that period of the history of Iberia. I mean, when I say that period, we're still talking about that. That was centuries long because remember, Granada is still a Muslim polity in Iberia at this time. So that is an ongoing, and I'm not going to say that like the level of violence or conquering of territory was the same throughout all those centuries, but really we're talking about like a 4 or 5 century period here. All right. So that was a nice digression about the location. Now, the people that are being written to are the the magistrates. So, I mean, the word is justitium. So, the people who are in charge of justice in this location. The probata is somebody that we've seen before, but not somebody that we see a lot. And, maybe that's because we don't look at the commune registers as much. So it's bonatas. Am I saying that right? Bonanatas egidi. Yep. And then we've got a mandawit at the end of the first line of the probata. And then we have the R, so some form of the king's something. And then we've got facta per, which means made by. And then we have a very clear treasurer. So tresesorum or tresesorium or something like that. It's the treasurer. So this is not a mandawit mihi from the king. It is coming from the treasurer. The origination of this document is coming from the treasurer. And I'm emphasizing that for a reason. And once we get into the topic of this document, you'll see why. One more thing in the apparatus for this document to point out, which is that the names at the end of the text block, we have something rather unusual. We've got one of the vice chancellors. Well, I guess. Yeah, we could say one of the... Well, no, there's only one. Okay, there's only one vice-chancellor, I think. It's Francesc Sacosta. His name is crossed out. Yeah, his name is crossed out there. And then we've got a little kind of plus that's been ornamented. And then that indicates it's the signature. It's who signed it. And then after that, we've got another... Gosh, I have to figure out how I'm going to phrase this. We've got someone else. And is it another vice chancellor? Maybe? Okay, well, we're going to talk about that in a sec, but let's talk about the name first. It's Domenicus Mosco. Mascho. And in modern orthography, we usually see this as Masco. So Dominic Mosco is someone that's known in the literary history of the Crown of Aragon and in Catalan letters because he was very active as a writer of, I think he wrote poetry himself, but he definitely was a translator of works of high literature. And so, in addition to being a court official, he was very active in the letters. So, Dominic Mosco, pretty interesting. There's a page in the book by Jose Tranxio Dena and Antonio Maria Arago, the one where they wrote about the structure of the chancery. And I had posted a little while ago a diagram from their book. They have a lot of diagrams, and they're the ones, this book really helped me to understand the probata in a way that I had not been able to figure out before. And in that book, on, I think, is it page 56, they list and the list starts actually on page 55, but when we get to page 56, there's this list of all of the vice chancellors, and Francesc Sacosta is at the top of the page. He was the first of the vice chancellors for Joan, and he was in that role from 1387 to 1389. But then, further down the page, Tranx y Odena and Arago, they say that for Valencia, there was another vice chancellor appointed. And this person was, you guessed it, Domenico Mosco, or Domenish Moscow. Oh gosh, I'm embarrassing myself. Okay, so Moscow was the one who was apparently a vice chancellor for Valencia. And he had been, this is coming from same book here, he had been a jurist, official, like a magistrate, I think, or a counselor of some kind, they're not sure, for Valencia, both in 1378 and 1386, just the previous year. So we have somebody who's got a significant amount of experience in Valencia. And all of that we should bear in mind as we get into the content of the letter. But we're not quite ready to go there yet, because I just wanted to point out that the document that comes before our document today is also one in which we've got a strike through at the end of the text block. And what has been crossed out is actually kind of interesting, because it's something like regem que. Now, when you add that at the end of a word, the QUE, it means that it's like both. So, and then we've got nostri and then primo. So something like our first. It is so weird what's at the end of that document. The document that we're looking at tomorrow, I think, is going to be a different one than what we're looking at right here. And I should actually clarify, oh gosh, I should have said this before, that when we're looking at today's document, you have to look all the way at the bottom of folio 160V. And our little document is split in half from the bottom of folio 160V to the top of folio 161R. So when I'm talking about where Francesc Sacosta has been crossed out, I'm talking about the top of folio 161R. And when I'm talking about this weird regemque nostri primo, I'm talking about something that's kind of at the bottom of folio 160V. But then we also have a plus Domenicus Mosco in the part that's at the very end of the text block for the June 3rd letter that appears right above our document for today. So what does this all mean? Why are they crossing things out? I do not know, but I have a theory. Let's just kind of play this out. So remember that what we're looking at are the copies of outgoing letters. And the scribe that entered these copies into the register, they, of course, would have had to have had the original next to them before it was sent out. And quite possibly, they would have been working with maybe a stack of them all at once. And if so, they might have started to notice patterns and then had an expectation. And so there might have been a situation on the day that Bonanatus Egidi was entering this into the register. He might have had a bunch of documents signed by Francesc Sacosta and then just seen this one and made an assumption that, oh, this is another one in the stack, so it's probably Sacosta who signed it. I mean, we see a lot that are signed by Sacosta for sure. Now, that's one theory. Another theory is that there was some kind of change made, that for some reason Sacosta had actually signed one document, and then they decided that it needed to be drawn up again, and it should be signed by Moscow. Or maybe they struck it through on the outgoing document. That would be really weird. I don't know. But what's clear is that this is a document from Dominicus Moscow because it's about a town that is within the boundaries of the province of Valencia. So Morella is just a little bit to the southwest of Tortosa, so it's close to the borderline between the province of Valencia and the province of Catalonia, but it's even closer to the border with the province of Aragon, the one that's the border that's to the very southernmost part. So there's like this place where all three of these provinces, they are actually meeting. So Morella is kind of close to that. So, but it's in Valencia. It's clearly inside Valencia. So I think this is why there might have been a change made to have Dominicus Moscow be the one to sign this document. All right. Now, we haven't even talked about the content of the document yet. It's about a murder case. Yeah. So this is a really good demonstration of how AI can be very helpful in pointing one's attention to one little word that dramatically shifts the meaning of the document. So when I'm looking at this document, before I run it through AI, I'm just trying to get a sense of, who are the people, what are the key terms in there, what are the major verbs, trying to start to unpack what is happening. And I did notice the word perpetrator. There's a cognate between Latin and English in the second line in the sort of middle of it, perpetratoris, okay, the perpetrators. And then in the third line, we have a strike through. The strike through is crossing out illate and changing it to the verb perpetrare, to perpetrate. So illate is actually a form of infero, which is a really weirdly conjugated Latin verb, and it has more of a neutral meaning, like just to cause something to happen. But here instead we've got to perpetrate, and that is a choice that I didn't quite understand at first, but then AI drew my attention to the word that follows perpetratoris in the second line. And when you look at it, you might just think it's something like neknon or something like that. It's N-E and then it could be a T, but it also could be a C, and then an abbreviation for the ending of the word. And I just kind of read over that. The word after that is dudum, and so I just kind of made an assumption, oh, these are both just sort of like connector words, but I was wrong. And the reason I found out my error was because AI identified this document as about a murder. And I was like, whoa, what? Where is there a murder? What is going on? The only word in the document that clues us into that is that little NEC word, nekis. it means killing, so to kill. And I think here it's not a verb, it's a noun. So there was a killing, there was a murder. And that shifts, of course, everything about the document. And so this is an instance where I think I eventually would have figured that out if I was going to take the time to really do a careful transcription of the document, and I would have had to figure out the different possibilities for that NEC word, and I think I would have eventually figured it out, but it would have taken so much time. And so it really is the use of AI that was able to help me speed up in my comprehension of the main issue of this document. Another place where the AI was not so helpful was figuring out the meaning of the third word in the third line. So we've got bikini, in the vicinity of, right, is a kind of English cognate. And then this, it was a place name. And I really felt strongly this is a place name. But in the initial work done by Gemini and Claude, they both didn't pick up on what this place name could be. And so the first thing that I do in that situation, because I know that it's got to be someplace close to Morella, is I go to the Wikipedia page for Morella and just look at, just see what other place names come up. And it turns out that there is a village that is close and sort of inside the, I guess you could say, municipal district in some way, region, locality, I don't know what term it is, but it's within the kind of like governing entity of Morella, and it's called Chiva, like CH and then IVA or IVIA. So I was able to just spot that from the list of the neighboring little regions connected to Morella right there in the Wikipedia article. And I was like, why couldn't the AI do that? So it's like one little step to be able to just digest the Wikipedia article about the place. And, I will say that Wikipedia has not, as an organization, authorized AI to scrape its data, but it is freely available on the internet, and so AI has done that. Yet another ethical problem that I will not excuse, but I will still use. So basically, I added a little instruction to my project prompt for when Claude works on these, saying that when you're trying to figure out a toponym, look at the Wikipedia articles about that place. I will also say that it was not an English language article on Morella in which I found that. All right. Lots of method tidbits in this document, this little document. So there was a murder, and the whole point of this document is to say, send us more information about the murder. So it might be that somebody has complained that maybe the restitution wasn't enough after this murder. We've got some names. It looks like the person who was murdered was Jacme Guiffa, and that the perpetrator was a certain Anthony who, or maybe the son of Anthony Scrivia, possibly. And so someone has brought to the attention of the court officials in Barcelona that something is not quite right with what happened with this case. We don't get any specifics, but Dominicus Moscow has requested that the documentation be sent to Barcelona. And that is not a small amount of documentation. I would guess that there's probably a stack of papers that are going to be copied and sent to Barcelona. I found from a little bit of reading around that there's actually quite a lot of documentation that could be written up in the inquests surrounding murders. And in one of those books that I read about this, which is about gender and women using the court system and how women were treated in the court system, it's a book called The Measure of Woman by Marie Kelleher. And in one of her examples that she looks at in that book, she said a murder inquest involved 53 witness statements. So sometimes it could really get to be a lot of documentation. Look at how this one little letter that's only about like 10 lines just has opened up so much to talk about. Really not an expected thing when I opened up this particular Commune register page and thought, okay, just one short one. It won't take too long to discuss. Whoopsie. Here we are over 30 minutes. Okay. One more quick thing is that I'm going to be leaning very heavily on the work of Daniel Girona y Llagostera, and today's document was identified by him in his itinerary. And if you don't know what I'm talking about there, I will just say that I'll put a link to the episode in which I discussed that at more length, and you can learn about the project that Daniel Girona y Llagostera did in the early 20th century, looking at these registers, tracking Joan's location. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Historian's Notebook, Season 1, Molt Cara Compagnona. If you are leaving with more questions than you arrived with, or if you're like, what, a murder case? And you like totally buried the most exciting part until the very end? If you're having any of those feelings, I've done my job. Remember, the motto of the Historian's Notebook is dissatisfaction guaranteed. Visit the website to see an image of today's document and additional show notes, and listen again tomorrow to hear about the next day in the first year of the reign of King Joan I of Aragon and Queen Violante de Bar. In the meantime, take care.